Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back to this episode of The Balanced Mind. We're talking today about the sales process of conversations and client engagement. So, first of all, we're going to be talking with Richard Bruin, my co-host here from Progress, and myself, Kim Searle of Emotional Mastery. And you will see that we've got Phil Sayers, a gentleman who we have both really taken to with regards to his whole ethos around these conversations, these selling conversations around client engagement. And I loved his approach. So it fitted really well with the idea that it's our inner world we need to address, not so much around the external side of things. So welcome, Philip or Phil. How do you want to be addressed?
There's only one person who ever used to call me Philip, and that was my mother, and I was usually in trouble at the time. So Phil, please. Yeah.
It's just that your email came through and I nearly ignored it because it was Philip
Funny
Sayers.
enough, I noticed that the other day and think I've never seen it before. I need to change it.
I understand. I will not call you Philip. Perfect. And Richard, hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Kim.
Eh,
Hi, Phil. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too, Richard. You too.
So we want to talk around the whole sales process because it scares the bejesus out of anybody who's not been in a sales role, myself included. And it was actually, I was listening to somebody else, it could have even been you, Richard, but that for me particularly, it's a coaching conversation. And I think that's what we got from you when we were talking to you about coming along. It's a conversation, isn't it? And we just want to explore that more. Um, so first of all, why do you think people, accountants, particularly and bookkeepers, are afraid of selling?
I think there's a number of reasons, to be honest, Kim. I think first and foremost, the word selling or the word sales scares people,
Mm,
not least because we've all been on the wrong end of some pretty appalling sales techniques in the past. The stereotypical pushy salesperson, and that's certainly not an approach I've ever advocated. So I think there's this misconception that to be good at selling, you've got to have the gift of the gab, you've got to be a good talker. And actually, it's the reverse that's true. You've got to be a good listener, you've got to be a good questioner. But I think in the accounting world, the big challenge for me, although ironically I built a business off the back of it, is the fact that to qualify as an accountant, you go through years and years of technical training, which teaches you the technical skills of accountancy. But there's nothing in any of that training that talks about the soft skills, how to engage with clients or potential clients, how to get them talking about what's important to them.
yeah.
So it's no great surprise that when you then turn to an accountant and say, right, okay, go and talk to this complete stranger who you've never met before in your life and encourage them to buy more services from you. And of course, they don't know where to start. So, I ran a workshop for an accounting firm a couple of weeks back. And as part of the preparation, I asked them, what did they want to get out of that session? What was it that worries them or scares them the most about selling to clients? And the big thing that came through was confidence, lack of confidence, which is derived from not having the skill set, not being ever having been explained to them how to have these types of conversations, how to control them, how to direct them, and avoid coming across as that stereotypical pushy salesperson.
Yeah, I think that's fair comment. Certainly from my perspective, it's the uncertainty and lack of control, which is the confidence thing that's impacts confidence, is because they don't know how it's going to go, and they're not in control, and finally they could be rejected. So we're hitting parts of the brain quite a lot with the things it doesn't like. So the skill set is so important because then the brains are, okay, I've got a framework to work with. They may still have a lack of confidence, but that comes with experience. And of course, your training enables that, I'm guessing.
It does. I mean, what the training covers really is a number of things. One is first and foremost, reframe the whole concept. So don't focus on selling. There's one of these wonderful, sadly no longer with us, American sales gurus by the fabulous name of Zig Ziglar. Some of his stuff was way over the top for my liking, but he has some absolute gems in there. And my favorite phrase of his was "Stop selling, start helping." And if you reframe the conversation you're having with your clients about saying, I'm not trying to sell anything, all I'm going to do is try and find ways to help you. And if I can find a way to help you, then potentially some sort of service, some chargeable fee earning service is going to be the mechanism for how I help you. But if you reframe it in your own mind about thinking around, all I want to do is try and help you, then actually you can take away a fair amount of the anxiety right up front. The other side that I cover in the training is really giving people a process to follow, so that you can then start to keep control of the conversation, so you know where you are in the process at any given point, and you can sort of reel it back if you need to. Because what will always happen with these types of conversations is that they're not linear. It's not, hello, Mr. Client, what problems have you got? How can I fix them? The conversation is going to go off here, there, and everywhere, weird and wonderful tangents. And you need to be able to understand where you've got to in the process and pull it back on track. And if you've got that process in the back of the mind, it gives you the control and the direction of the conversation. And you also hit the other nail on the head earlier on, Kim, where if you've also got techniques as to how to handle the rejection, the objections, and actually in many cases ask for objections, because they can even be your friend. Again, it gives you that self-confidence to be able to continue with the conversation and not worry about where the hell is this going.
I think it sort of reflects the profession's attitude towards sales and accountants' attitude towards sales almost reflects the journey that the profession's been on, because it has always been a reactive profession. For 500 years, clients have brought something into the accountant's office, and the accountant has done it and charged them for it. And for that reason, there hasn't almost been that need to sell. It's been a very comfortable profession. We haven't needed to get out there and sell. We start every fresh year with an existing bank of clients who will want work doing. It's not like we haven't got to start afresh each year. And so as Phil rightly says, we haven't developed a culture around selling. We haven't developed training processes around selling. In fact, most of our training does the opposite. You hear accountants say, well, it's not very professional, is it? Yeah, and that sort of thing. And the fundamental point I will always make with accountants is, let's just get real for a minute. You are running a business. Any business that doesn't sell immediately has a problem. So this isn't a conversation about whether you should be selling or not, because that isn't, there's not an option on that. You sell or you close your doors. This is a conversation around how you sell. And I get, people say, my clients don't want to be sold to. None of us want to be sold to. Yeah. When we walk into a car sales room, the last thing we want, in fact, is someone to leap on us and go, and start chucking numbers in our face. We want help and support to get us to we recognize that we want to buy something, almost, we have a need, and we want their help and support to solve that problem. Nobody likes being sold to. If I'm being honest, very few people like selling. It's a British thing, isn't it? We don't talk about money. We don't ask for things. We don't, that's not what we do. So there is an element of, we need to get over ourselves. We're not unique that we don't know how to sell or don't like selling, but we're running businesses. We need to find a process and a way in which we do it. And as Phil says, I think part of that story is to have a system that gives us, like everything else in our firms, gives us something to fall back on. The other bit is just a bit of honesty, because that's really what we're talking about. I always make the point to accountants, when was the last time you tried to get a client to do something that wasn't good for them? And the answer will be, never have. Okay, so sales process is actually really easy, because we're talking to clients about things that we know are good for them. And actually, if we're not, we shouldn't be having that conversation. There's nothing harder to sell than something that you don't believe in. You've got to be an absolute hard-headed salesperson to sell something that you don't believe in, and sell something that you don't believe is good for the customer. We believe in what we do, and we believe it's good for the customer. So actually, sales should be easy. We've just got to get over the word. It's not a swear word. Let's get over it and move on.
It is. You're absolutely right, Richard. And that's, I say, why I like this reframing of, stop selling, start helping, because, you're not a product pusher here. You're not trying to insist that your client does something. And there's two elements to this. There's your ability to see how you might be able to help your client. But the real skill that comes off the back of that is then helping the client understand and acknowledge that you can help them address some sort of problem that they've got. And this is one of the traps I see a lot of accountants falling into, because and I do wonder if it's because of the way accountants are trained in terms of looking at the world in a black and white view. You know, the trial balance either balances or it doesn't. You know, the P&L is either accurate or it's not. When you're talking to a client or even a potential client, they will know what they want. They'll have a shopping list of things they know they want. And usually it's the bookkeeping, it's the tax returns, it's the VAT returns, it's all the compliance stuff. But for a lot of them, there'll be things that actually they need, but nobody's ever asked them the right questions. And this is really where the sales in inverted comma conversation comes into play, in helping the client to start thinking differently about how they're running their business or how they're running their personal finances or the personal life. Because if you can help them acknowledge that A, they've got a problem, B, it's a problem that really ought to be fixed, and C, they can see what the difference is going to be when they fixed it, then they're far more likely to want to go along the journey that you're proposing. If you I've told this story a few times. There's an accountant that I've worked with for a long time, and I've been coaching him for a while. And he's one of these incredibly insightful individuals. He can look at a set of accounts, he can have a 10, 15-minute conversation with a client, and he'll come out with a list of things that he knows the client needs to do. And then he gets really frustrated with the client when he tells them that what they need to have is a business plan, regular cash flow forecasts, they need monthly management reports, they need a monthly call with him to explain what's going on and look at the numbers. And he gets really frustrated when the clients don't immediately jump up and say, yeah, that's a great idea, let me have it, because they're not seeing the value of it. And he's sort of trying to leap to the end point rather than taking the client through that process of understanding where the real value of what he's offering is for them. And so at times you need to step away from sort of product pushing and really help the client come to their own conclusions that A, something's wrong that needs to be addressed, B, they understand what's going to happen if it doesn't get fixed, and C, they understand how it's going to benefit them if they fix this problem with your help. And lo and behold, you are the best placed person to be able to help them solve this particular issue.
So it's demonstrating the value, then, I guess, is what you're saying.
It's quite, I mean, my book which is a sort of introduction to sales techniques for small businesses, and that's exactly why I gave it that title. It's all about the value. Unless Richard's right, unless you really believe in the value of what you're selling, you're never going to convince anybody else. And unless they believe in the value of what you're offering them, they're never going to buy it. And that value has got to be far in excess of the fees that they're going to be incurring to work with you.
I think you hit on a really good point there, Phil, because I wonder if what's at the heart of the problem is it's sales is a process, as you say. You've got to identify your need, you've got to identify the solution, you've then got to sit in front of clients and demonstrate that solution, that need, what the benefit is. There's a whole process to go through. But all of the time, there is this fixation with the last bit of the conversation, which is, how much are you going to charge me? Yeah. And to some extent, the clients are guilty of that as well, because they'll get, like that example they said, think, well, this all sounds well and good, but I'm waiting to listen. What I'm listening for is, what's this going to cost me? And it's almost like, because we are worried about that last bit, we don't handle the rest of it very well anyway, because there's it's almost like what I like to do with clients is say, look, let's park that bit for a moment. Let's park, I know you're going to worry about price, I know you're going to worry about budget. Let's just, for a minute, let's just park that. Just trust me that we'll find a solution to that bit. Let's talk about the problem. Let's talk about the solution. Let's talk about what we can do. Try and move that to one side for a moment so that I stop worrying about it, they stop worrying about it, because it's irrelevant until we reach a point where they go, we really want to do this. We really want to buy that. Then we can have the conversation. And often it's not about the quantitative side. It's not about how much it costs. It's about how they're going to pay for it. And that's a different conversation again, because
That's an entirely separate conversation. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a really interesting scenario that you've outlined there, Richard. I mean, I've had this particular conversation many times with accountants, because as you both know, I sort of wear two hats. So as well as my own business, which is the sales training and the coaching side, I also look after the UK sales activity for The Gap, a software product that enables accountants to promote, sell, and deliver advisory services. And I've had lots and lots of conversations with accountants over the years where they'll look at something like The Gap, which includes, as one of the services in there, things like business planning. And they'll say, oh, no, I've spoken to my clients. They're not interested in business plans. And my immediate response is, well, just walk me through that conversation. Let me understand what it is they're saying to you when they say they don't want a business plan. And usually the way it's been framed is that the accountant has said to the client, look, I've looked at last year's accounts. I actually think what would be really helpful is if we work together on a plan to work out, what your goals are for the next 12 months and how we're going to achieve them. And then the client sort of looks vaguely interested and then says, how much is that going to cost me? And when the accountant says that's going to be 1,500 quid, the client says one of two things. It's either no thanks or let me think about it, which is just a guarded way of saying no thanks. And the key thing here is reframing the conversation in the way that you've outlined, Richard. And if you go back to the client and say, look, I've been looking at your last year's accounts. I actually think there's probably a couple of things that we could work on together, that if we get them right, by the end of the year, you could probably earn another £50,000 and you'll probably have an additional £40,000 of cash in your bank. What would you do with that if we could achieve those results? And then you can see the cogs whirring. They start to think, well, I could pay myself more, or I could afford the family holiday to Disneyland that the kids have been pestering me for the last 5 years. And then you say, well, okay, so the way we could do this is if we work together on a business plan, we'll set out those are the goals for the year. We'll agree some milestones we need to hit along the way so we keep control of this, and we'll agree some strategies we're going to put into practice, and we'll put some actions in place, and I'm going to hold you accountable for doing these things that you say you're going to do. Our fee for that, given my experience and expertise, is £1,500. How does that sound? And then the client's looking at this in a completely different way. No longer is it just he's trying to charge me 1,500 quid more than he did last year, to 50 grand more profit or salary and a £40,000 cash bonus versus a 1,500 quid cost. That actually sounds like quite a good deal. And it's all about reframing. This is where the whole idea of understanding your real value to the clients is so crucial in helping them understand how you can best help them. If all they see you as somebody who's pushing another service and an additional fee, of course they're going to push back. Of course they're going to resist. But if they can see that you're genuinely trying to help them achieve something that's really important to them, whether it's earnings, whether it's reducing the working hours, whether it's expanding the business, whether it's planning for some sort of exit, whatever's important to them, that's what they're going to value. And then the services that you provide are just a means to an end of helping the client achieve whatever their particular unique goals are.
It's interesting as you're talking there, because one of the challenges of some of the clients I've seen is the confidence and the ability to go back to existing clients to raise fees, particularly if they've not done it for a few years. So it can be a bit of a difficult conversation. But what I'm hearing here is if they can go back and explain how they can help and the impact of that would make raising fees a lot easier. Is that what you're saying?
It's one as part of what I'm saying, absolutely. And I think it comes back to believing in the value of what you're delivering. If you genuinely believe that you're providing real value for money to your clients, then don't be afraid to justify it. You'll be incurring increased costs at the moment, as every other business in the country is. So there is every justification for you to regularly revise your fees. Make no bones about it, that's the advice we'd be giving to the clients, is they should be monitoring their own costs, their profitability. That's all we're doing. We're just reviewing our own profitability. But if we can also demonstrate to them the value that we've delivered to them over the last 12 months, the last 24 months, maybe we did a tax review session with them and we saved them, £10,000 in tax. that's real value to them, and they'll forget that. The minute you've delivered a tax
Yes, they
saving of
never.
10 grand, they'll forget it. Absolutely guarantee it. And that's not a criticism of the client.
That's human
So
nature.
we do need to remind them. Yeah, we need to remind them. But again, if we have these open, supportive conversations and are continuously looking for ways to help our clients more and more, then it becomes so much easier to justify bigger fees, because those fees are just reflecting the added services and the added value that we're now delivering.
Mm.
I think it's why I see it is it's nowhere near as complicated a situation as most seem to think it is, because on the one hand, you just have that need for a system where and essentially a system that demonstrates value. I mean, Phil mentioned the Gap there. Gap has its value register, for instance, doesn't it, Phil? So, you know, ways of, because clients just assume, if we don't tell them, they assume it's dead easy and it didn't take any time at all. And no, you know, so we have to educate clients on that. And you have a system that helps you to do that. But the other side is it is no more complicated than being honest. I mean, that thing that you mentioned there, Kim, where, you know, we see this a lot because we're talking to firms about how to change. So they'll engage in a particular aspect of changed behavior or changed services, and they'll go, that's dead easy for new clients because as of tomorrow, we can just say to any new client, this is how we do it. They'll go, yeah, that's fine. What do we do with our existing clients? Because they're used to us being different. And I said, well, what you do is you sit down and you have an open and honest conversation. So if you've been undercharging a client, you sit down and you have that conversation. Now, the client might say, well, why didn't you do something like this 2 years ago? And I go, it's a fair comment. You know, maybe I probably should have done. I was worried about your position at the time or whatever it may be. But if we think that we're being undercharged, for instance, to sit down with a client and say, look, we've had a look at your fees. You're currently paying £1,200 a year. Actually, it's costing us £4,000 a year. You know, we both run businesses. You'll understand that can't continue. Equally, I'm not just going to slap you with a £4,000 fee now, because I get that would be unfair, and yeah, you need time to adjust. So what I propose is that maybe over the next, let's say, 2 years or 3 years, we build up to this particular point, and this is what we'll do, and this is what you'll do. And in other words, you have a grown-up conversation with the client. The client, you know, this fear that we have of the client saying no, or the potential client saying no, do you know what? They're perfectly entitled to. You know, as Bill has quite rightly said, all we can do is present our case as best as we can. You know, we present the benefits, the value, we're open, we're honest. It's the client can go yes, or the client can go no, or the client can go, okay, can we talk about it a bit more? That's their right. Yeah, we've got to stop. And if they say no, okay, that's fine. We say no plenty of times to other people. Doesn't mean to say we don't like them or don't trust them. It simply means that deal doesn't work for us. We've just got to chill out a bit more when it comes to these conversations. And if we're being, you know, I think we've talked about it a lot, haven't we, Kim? There's a fundamental issue with accountants, which is lack of confidence and lack of self-confidence. This is one of those things where it's just like, just be honest, just be yourself. If clients can't deal with you being yourself, then they're the wrong client anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know, you explain the situation, you explain why you're doing it, you explain what the costs are, you explain how you're going to price it, then hand it over to the client. And if the client agrees, great. If they don't agree, well, let's have a conversation. You know, but it's nothing harder than sitting and talking to somebody. We're not selling double glazing.
Exactly. And I think you're right, is that it comes back to confidence again, Richard. I see a lot of accountants who are absolutely scared stiff of saying to a client, I'm going to put our fees up by 20% this year. What if they say no? What do I do? Oh, that sounds scary. I won't bother. And then they just sit year after year with the same fee structure, but their costs are rising and they're making no more profit. You're right. You've got to have an open and honest conversation with the client. And if they say no, ask them what it is about what you propose that they're uncomfortable with. They'll tell you. They might think you're trying to rip them off. It might be they think they can't afford it. But if they say something like, I can't afford it, then maybe there are things that you can do to make it easier. Maybe we spread the cost. Maybe we introduce things gradually. You know, it's you can be flexible. You don't have to make things black and white every time. But it's all about having these open and honest conversations.
Yeah, it's a two-way conversation, isn't it? And this is where I think the system is important as well, because that gives you the preparation for that conversation, because you've got to know in your own mind what pitch you're playing on, haven't you? Almost like what's my starting point? What would I be happy with? What am I not prepared to go below? Where can I show flexibility? Where not? And that then, because you then know your own strategy, if you like, that actually allows you to sit and listen to the client. Because most of the time we're not even listening to the client. We're second guessing what their answer is going to be and trying to think what our next statement is going to be. And it's like, well,
Yes.
it's no surprising that we don't have a successful conversation with them. So that to have a system, so like for instance, to have an internal price list, I think is a good thing. I don't know what you think, Phil, but I think that gives us a starting point. It's not something that is rigid, that we're fixed to. But when a client says, how much would you charge me for this? We've got something that we can refer back to. At the moment, for so many firms, it's, it doesn't work very well, does it? Sticking a finger in the air when it's a podcast, but you get my point. We just sort of, if you look at a typical accountancy firm, you can look at two clients who are identical clients who are paying entirely different fee structures, because there's been no system to create those fee structures in the first place. It's based on 10% of whatever last year's was, plus a bit, it's that sort of thing. We just need to get a bit more business-like and a bit more organised in this side of the business.
You do, and then funnily enough, I had the exact same conversation with the firm I did the workshop for a couple of weeks ago about having an internal price list. Now, most firms will, and that you know that all of the standard services that you're going to be offering, and it's relatively straightforward to assign prices to those. But that price list can evolve and develop as you have different conversations with clients. So as you start to become more involved in exploring the other ways that you might be able to help your clients, you'll identify new opportunities and therefore new services that you could offer. So you're just continuously reviewing and adding to your list of services and their associated prices. So it just evolves over time.
So I'm scarily, we're coming up to the half-hour mark, but I wonder, is there any other tips? I mean, we've covered some of the issues that people will have on the whole process. The fact they're seeing it as selling and it's a dirty word. The fact that they are talking about a lack of confidence, and is that the right thing to be doing, and the consequences if the client says no, and how to handle it. The whole process thing that we've talked about here. But are there any tips that you could offer the audience or listeners here with regards to the sales process that we may not have touched on?
I think this confidence thing comes through time and time again, and a lot of people they like the idea of being able to have these open conversations with clients, and they go, well, how the hell do I start? And I would say, pick on your favorite clients, the ones you have a really good relationship with, and say to them, look, I want to try something new. Are you open to having a bit more of a conversation around what's going on in your world? And then ask them really, really open-ended questions like, just out of interest, if you could change 3 things in your business over the coming 12 months, what would they be? Because that's going to give you some insights into where the client thinks there may be issues that need addressing, or where the client is sort of setting themselves some goals they'd like to achieve, but are perhaps struggling to do so at the moment. And the key thing is, if you ask these big open questions and encourage the client to do most of the talking, then the conversation becomes so much easier. The trap you have to avoid falling into is equating pitching with selling. Selling is not a product pushing exercise. Selling is about helping the client acknowledge and accept that there are things they need to change, things they need to do. If all you're doing is sitting there and saying, well, we can do your tax returns and we'll do your year-end accounts and we can do your business plan and we'll give you a cash flow forecast, there's no value in that to them unless they understand how all of this stuff is going to help them, how it's going to link with their own personal goals or personal challenges. Then they're never going to buy into whatever it is that you're offering. So don't fall into the trap of pitching. Get the client to do all the talking, because that's how you're going to uncover the issues that are important to them, and therefore the opportunities for you to provide extra help.
Yeah,
I think that's a fantastic point, Phil. That difference between pitching and selling is it's a terrific point. But from our point of view, I would always recommend people just take a fresh look at the value that they really deliver. Yeah, because a lot of what, we do the same things every day in many cases, and because of that, we lose sight of the real value of them. It's just a tax return, it's just a set of accounts, it's just payroll, it's just a meeting. None of it is just. All of that delivers real benefit to the clients, time savings, money savings, reassurance, security, all of this. And I think to sit down with your team and go, okay, let's take a tax return. What benefit do we really deliver when we do a standard tax return? Because I think part of the problem is that if you don't value it, the client sure as hell ain't going to value it. Yeah. So we do a lot of valuable stuff as accountants. We make a difference every day. Yeah, don't lose sight of that.
One of the most powerful ways of thinking about this, I've found, Richard, is to ask yourself what I call the so what question. So we're doing payroll for a client. So what? Well, it means that everybody gets paid on the right day for the right amount. Okay, so what? Well, it means your staff are happy. So what? Well, maybe you're not losing staff. So what? Well, it means you've got a much more stable business. So what? And you can keep going and going and going to ridiculous lengths with this. But it's a really interesting way of thinking about the issues that you're discussing with your clients, to think, actually, how can I add more value here? Because running a payroll, yes, it's all about accuracy and timeliness, but it's saving them time. So what? Well, maybe they get the weekends back. So what? Well, maybe it takes the pressure off the relationships at home. Again, just keep asking yourself this question, so what? Because you'll start to uncover all sorts of additional value that actually you're delivering to your clients that they probably never thought about. And if you don't point this out to them, of course, they're not going to value what you do for them.
No, it's a very good point.
Yeah, very good. So we're going to have you back at some point, I think, Phil, because there was a load of things I could have mentioned there, but it just time-wise, we needed to focus on the key things, which you have done beautifully. Thank you so much. So for our listeners, I know you've got you run a training session, don't you? Every so often, client engagement skills for accountants, how to sell without being pushy. It's a half-day interactive workshop. You're going to let us know the details so we can pop them in the description of the podcast, please. And for those of you who are interested, I'm going to show it because this is going out on YouTube as well. There is a book as well. I'm not sure if that's coming up right. It's All About the Value by Phil Sayers. You can see I'm reading it because it's important to understand. So just another thing that you can tap into. And obviously, Phil, we'll put your details in the thing so that they can also reach out to you if they need to.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. It's been really good, really interesting, because I've just really picked up the pace on conversational calls with people. And it's much easier. And I think I'm in the right place to be doing that now, whereas before I never knew quite what to say and when to say it. So yeah, I think it's really important to have somebody like you in the background that helps. Richard has helped me enormously, so perfect. Lovely. So listeners, I'd like to tell you what the next one is, but I haven't prepared that, so I have no idea. But please do join us in 2 weeks, because I am sure we'll have another great conversation. Richard and I will be tackling whatever the next topic is with gusto. Thank you so much for tuning in. Speak to you all soon.
All right, thanks.
Bye everybody.